Gigi Berardi recording FoodWISE tonight, continuing with this section on sensory science, the taste experience. Sensory scientist Jacob Lonnie considers the validity of the methods, best practices, for conducting such research. Lonnie, like other sensory scientists, is interested in what constitutes a true sensory experience. He calls for more careful attention to what we mean by valid sensory properties attributed to specific practices and locales. What about that slight green tinge to Butte County, Sacramento Valley early season olive oil? And whether or not we can get valid descriptions of food when we take it out of a production context and put it in a laboratory setting. These are good questions to ask of the over-commercialized, standardized market we are in today. In order to move away from processed foods, we need to understand what we're moving toward and why our tomato sauce will be so much better once we get there. For that, we need to study the olive oil as well as the tomatoes that make good sauce. And that is my introduction to the study I've referred to once or twice already about olive oil, burning olive oils, whose tastes are, whose sensory profile changes in the presence of a particular bean paste or a tomato sauce. So I'll describe that study tomorrow night. Lonnie's work is completely fascinating. He's looking at whether sensory science, quasi-experimental research designs even applies to artisanal foods. Because once you take the artisanal foods out of the production place and put it into a laboratory setting where people are testing and tasting it, it may change completely in terms of its sensory profile. Also, the entire system seems to be geared towards standardized foods that are made on a relatively large scale in bulk. And that's not what artisanal foods are, is it? So there's all sorts of questions that are raised once we start talking about sensory science in the production of artisanal foods. The image tonight is of an artisanal food produced by my daughter, Emily, using our artisanal heritage tomatoes. And my gosh, we've been growing these little beasts for decades. And I have to say, this is the first year where all of the varieties are really excellent. It's not always like that. And so we have these stuffed tomatoes with a green. And that is the image. But the article focuses on COVID response and COVID precautions in Africa, broadly speaking, the African subcontinent, and talking about a few places, but these are typical of many spots in countries in Africa, which have done very well in terms of protecting their population during the COVID pandemic.